Hey, hi, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, and I've got a special guest this morning, Dan Viens from the Seahawks Forever podcast and channel. Welcome in, Dan. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm always good. This is the time of year that it's probably the hardest time to be a football fan because you're thirsty for information and knowledge, and you want training camp to be here. But at the end of the day, it's coming up quick. I feel like it was just yesterday where it seemed like it was a million miles away, but now we're less than 3 weeks away from the start of camp. So I'm good.
Yeah, wild. So it's been a kind of a fun off season. Really enjoyed it. We got together prior to the draft, which was or during the draft, which was fun, and it's been fairly quiet. Like the mini camps came and went. There's no real drama. I think the only real drama that the team really had was kind of the skepticism that's percolating a little bit around Sam Darnold and what he's going to be able to do. Like there was one practice where it wasn't so great for him. All the rest, it's it's all relative, but it seems like that's really the only thing circling this team. And I think that Coach McDonald put that to bed fairly quickly. And I think Sam eventually will too, as soon as most folks get a chance to see him in training camp. What are your thoughts on that sort of stuff?
So many thoughts. First of all, can we stop normalizing like tracking quarterback performance in OTAs statistically? Like that became a thing this year. I think it was the Browns, some content creator or their ESPN affiliate or something for the Browns started doing that, tracking that, which I guess for any team in the league, it would make some sense for the Browns because they have like 9 quarterbacks that are battling for the starting job. But they would show their stats every day. I do think too much is made out of a quarterback's struggles from a purely statistical standpoint. Now, yes, last year, when we started getting reports about what Sam Howell looked like in practice, it was different. It was more along the lines of like he was just over his head. He looked lost, uncomfortable, like he didn't fit. He didn't belong. Like how in the heck did he, throw for 4,000 yards last year in Washington? That's not what we were hearing about Sam early on. It was just that he threw some interceptions. Well, when you take a look in a vacuum of, the circumstances he threw those interceptions in, first of all, new team, new coordinator, new receivers, getting used to all that. It's fine. You can't just say, well, he's played in this scheme before and expect it all to just be gravy from day one, right? But he's also playing against shells, 7-on-7, 11-on-11, when there's no contact, no pads. The defense knows that you're not going to run the football. So the linebackers especially, they can cheat a little bit, get into their drops a little bit earlier. Same with the safeties. But then he was also facing a defense returning all 11 starters, 15 players who started games last year, a defense that the last half of last season was a top 10, borderline top 5 defense in every major category. And I would expect to be one from the start this year that has as much continuity and chemistry as any defense in the league this year in March and April and May. That let's give him a little bit of a break and let's see what happens when we start, playing preseason games and getting into the season, because he's going up against one of the best defenses in the league. I'm still bullish on Sam Darnold. I think at the end of the day, we can nitpick the differences between him and Geno, and certainly there's a lot of that happening. But when Geno made it clear that he wanted to go play for Pete, right? And that's what happened. Had nothing to do with money or guarantees or anything else. Let's be clear about that. We know more about that situation now than we did when it was unfolding. That by bar none, pivoting to Sam Darnold was the best plan B the Seahawks could possibly have executed. There was no better option. And so for now, I'm good with that. And I expect him to play well, especially in this new scheme with this coaching staff and some of the other changes they've made on offense.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I want to just lay out the show really quick. Dan is here because Keith is not. Keith, well, we would have you in as a guest anyway, but Keith's on vacation. So you've been gracious to come in and fill his big shoes. I appreciate that a lot. The second thing was topics. So we're going to start talking about the edge rusher group today and kind of get into that a little bit, find out how good that group is currently, how good it can be, in the second year of Mike Macdonald's scheme. We're going to talk about the offensive coaching staff additions to this offense. We just talked about Sam Darnold. How does that work with the new scheme? And then we were going to talk about a few of our favorite camp battles as we get ready to head into training camp. So one other thing before we get into the edge rushers, I wanted to ask you if you've noticed kind of a palatable change in this team focus, the mentality of this team heading into this season compared to last season.
I think so. I think for two reasons. One is Mike Macdonald just seems really comfortable in his skin now. You know, this time a year ago, and even into the early part of the season, I felt like, you know, it's all so much to learn how to be a head coach for the first time in your career. And I remember at the time talking about how I think some of us were taking that for granted. Even things like how you deal with the media, right? That doesn't come easily to everyone. Some are better at it than others. Some are really good at the media and not so good at coaching, and vice versa. But he just seems in total command now. And then you hear the stories about like what the practices are like and just how drilled down they are, and how the execution and the attention to details and all that. There was the practice where it got a lot of attention that he stopped practice and kind of lit into some guys because he didn't like how things were going. This is his program now. He's not the young guy taking over for the old legend. And, you know, those are tough, big shoes to fill, everything else. This feels like his program now. And we've seen his fingerprints even in all the offseason moves and the player acquisitions. And so I think this team on both sides of the ball this year is going to start to resemble the team that he wants it to be and the identity that he wants it to have. The other part of it is the buy-in. Like, here we are, you see what's happening in other markets, you know, Cincinnati, certainly, and even other places where there's uncertainty, in places like Miami. And is this guy going to get traded? Is he going to be with us or not? There's other contenders that still have holes on their roster, or that have players that are unhappy with their contracts. None of that this year. And I think that I think you can give credit to Mike Macdonald for that. Obviously, clearly, we're seeing already that players like playing for him and want to be part of this program. But also to John Schneider for like identifying the right kind of players to bring into this program and add to it. It makes you wonder what the last 3 months would have been like had they put their foot down and not traded Geno, not traded DK. Said, nope, we want you guys. We want you on our roster. I said all the way through the process, I wanted those two players to stay on the roster. I wonder what kind of negativity that might have brought, you know, because certainly unless they immediately signed him to new contract extensions, which usually isn't their MO, those two players weren't going to play and report probably. So it just seems like it's all just hunky-dory in Seahawks land right now.
Well, I would say on that front with DK Metcalf and Geno Smith, that it would have seemed to me like they were just running it back. They were just running it back. They were kind of letting Geno Smith play out that deal. You're going to give him one more shot. Maybe the defense incrementally better. Maybe the offense with the new scheme, focusing on the running game, would allow the current offense, as it was constructed at the end of the year, to come back and have a shot at being a little better, a little bit more efficient. But I wouldn't have been excited. I don't think, even on the defensive side, it's like, yeah, the defense can only do so much. The offense, they're going to be carrying the offense's water again.
How much of that is how you really feel, Bill, or is how much of that is like the benefit of 2020 hindsight, right? Because I feel the same way, but when I think back to before the moves, like as I said, I wanted Geno Smith to remain. I wanted DK to still be on this roster. And I think it's ironic now that it's going to be someone else playing in this offense, because I think all the changes that they made in bringing in this, you know, making the OC hire that they did, bringing in this aligned coaching staff that had so much history together, bringing in this particular scheme. I thought it was all meant to be to the benefit of Geno Smith. And I was excited about how I thought those moves were going to get the most out of him. We were going to see the best version of him. And then, nope, we don't, because he wants out. And so I think I would have been as optimistic However, there's a couple of moves they wouldn't have been able to make concurrent with that, right? And so kind of, opportunity cost there. But also now being here where we are today, it just, the moves they did make just seem so refreshing that I do think I feel more optimistic now, just because even if they had given Geno a new deal and he was brought back and he was happy, like he was just wired differently. He was just wound differently. He was just, tight and intense. I feel like this Cooper Kupp, Sam Darnold kind of attitude and mindset and personality is one that just feels refreshing. It's a little easier to get excited about what they bring just because it's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. It seems the way that I would look at it is, yes, they seemingly did all those things early on for the benefit of Geno Smith. I think that kind of shows you how similar Sam Darnold and Geno Smith are and can be efficiency wise in an offense like this, where it is based on a wide zone stretch running game. They're going to be, instead of running the ball, I think last year their running rate was close to 39%, maybe, and it will be closer to maybe 45% this year.
Sounds about right.
And hopefully more efficient. And that, I think that would have given both quarterbacks better opportunities to just be better and to create higher percentages of third down conversions and in the red zone and so forth. So
I do think there are similarities, in their skill sets and in their play styles. In some way, the one advantage I think that Darnold brings is even though, Geno was always underrated as an athlete and surprisingly mobile, even as he, advances into his 30s, those intentional pocket movements that Clint Kubiak likes to use, that system has always used with some of those designed rollouts and half rolls. I think Geno would have executed those really well, but I think Sam can and will actually run the football more. You wouldn't want Geno running the football as much as maybe some other quarterbacks in this system. And I think that might just give him a little bit of an edge. I think defenses are going to have to respect the fact he might take off and run.
Yeah. Wow. We could go down a serious rabbit hole here if we start talking about Jalen Milroe and that opportunity as well. To add to that,
it's going to be a part of what they do.
Defense.
I know there's still a lot of fans are skeptical, you're going to break his rhythm. Teams say it, but they never do it. I think it was a very intentional part of the process of deciding to draft him. It wasn't just for what he could be, but also what he can give you now.
Right. Yeah, I feel a little better about the Sam Darnold situation. It still seems a little bridgy to me. Now, Sam Darnold could blow us out of the water. He could be here for 5 or 6, 7 years and win a Super Bowl. I think you can win a Super Bowl with Sam Darnold. I think Minnesota showed that last year. Now, he ran into some issues at the end of the year, but nonetheless, 14 games in the regular season, as far as wins go, he showed you that he could do that for you. Build the right roster around him. I think we have that, at least on defense. We'll see on offense. There's still a lot of open questions there, and hopefully those will mostly get answered in training camp.
I do feel like he's taking a little bit too much of the brunt of the criticism for those last 2 performances by the Vikings, especially that Rams playoff game. You go back and watch that, and if you're going to put that all on Sam, then you don't know football, in my opinion. Like that, agreed. There were so many issues. That was a total team breakdown. And when it comes to the 9 sacks, like, first of all, that was a defense that, a young defense really came together, and that defensive line was causing problems for everybody at the end of the season. But also there's a reason, and that game points it out, why Minnesota flushed out their entire interior offensive line and switched that out in the offseason because it wasn't good enough. There were other systematic issues there when it came to Sam. It's funny to me how that changed the narrative, though, right? Like, last year, he was one of the darlings of the league. He was one of the biggest storylines of the league, got MVP votes, right? This is the next Geno Smith. He's resurrected his career. This is why he was a top 5 pick. And yet he's suddenly not good enough. And that's why we're discounting the Seahawks and we're picking him 3rd or 4th in the division because we're not sure about Sam Darnold. But meanwhile, Geno Smith, who was a very polarizing player, both locally and nationally, his entire 3 years as a starter here, suddenly he's showing up in top 10 quarterback lists Like, he was such an inspired move for the Raiders. They're going to turn this thing around quickly. They really got a gem in Geno. Where was that love for Geno Smith last year? And the year before.
Right.
And the year before. So,
yes,
no,
right.
to your point, the best thing, let's be clear, the best thing that could happen for the Seattle Seahawks is for Sam Darnold to be really good. And for him to be so good that they sign him to another contract in a year or two, right? But even if he's just really just good, solid good, Geno Smith good, middle of the pack good, Matt Hasselbeck good. That's always been my comp for him, kind of. As long as they develop him properly, I'm on record as saying, somebody asked me point blank on a show a couple of weeks ago, who do you think is going to be the starting quarterback for the Seahawks in 2027? And I said, Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Yeah. The development of that guy is going to be fun to watch.
It's going to make preseason games is probably more fun than they've been in a very long time.
Yeah. I just want the Seahawks at all costs and Mike McDonald to avoid a controversy around that as much as possible. But there's always going to be some talk when you have a quarterback that talented sitting on your bench, especially after preseason, where he shows off those legs, where he can get to the edge and annihilate angles like no other quarterback. It's going to be, and watch him throw the ball. Now, everyone thinks, because everyone's been talking about him not being able to throw the ball very good and his accuracy issues and so forth. That dude can sling it, right? Yeah. He can throw the ball. He is really accurate, especially when his base is solid. He can deliver that ball into tight windows, the whole thing. He's just inconsistent. But if he strings together a few of those things in preseason and he runs the ball, there's gonna be some challenges.
There's always fans that think that the next guy is the better choice, right? My dad and I argued for a decade about Matt Hasselbeck, with me trying to convince him how good of a quarterback Matt Hasselbeck really was. And it's ironic that you bring up, that concept of like, what if he has a great preseason? Because there were a lot of fans. My dad wasn't the only one who, during much of Matt Hasselbeck's time here, thought that Seneca Wallace should be the starting quarterback because of what he would do in the preseason, how dynamic he looked as an athlete and being able to run the football. So I think there are some parallels there, but it's, as long as people understand the preseason is not real football, then, maybe we can look at it objectively, or try to. Anyway, it's still going to be fun.
All right, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. I think first off, before we get into individual players, maybe you can kind of lead into that. Why don't you set up for us as your perspective, how this room is set up, and do you think it's a strength of the team? Do you think there's anything that might be missing, and what your expectations are for this group just out of the gate in year 2 of Mike McDonald's scheme?
It's an interesting group. It's a very eclectic group. I think there's a great mix of youth and upside and some veteran experience. But there's enough uncertainty sprinkled into it that I don't feel as good about it as I want to. And part of that is that, even under Pete and even the first year with Mike McDonald, when we had Draymond Jones, who was technically, playing edge last year, mostly. And they even, at the beginning of the season, they looked like they were committed to keeping Darrell Taylor. And then even when they traded Darrell Taylor and then acquired Travis Gibson, they always had 5. And so it just made it a little more of a comfortable exercise looking at that entire group. When you're talking about Darrell Taylor being your 5th edge in that group last year and just kind of being a specialist, like, you felt pretty good about that. There isn't a 5th guy this year. Now, maybe it ends up being Jared Ivey or somebody else. Maybe it ends up being Trey Hendrickson. Like, well, we can talk about those ideas, but it's on the surface. I think it has a chance to be one of the best edge groups in the conference. It's just, you're talking about, there aren't any slam dunks. There aren't any sure things, right? Uchenna Nwosu, we know how good a player he can be, but can he be healthy? He's gone 2 back-to-back years now, only playing 7 games. If he's healthy, he's a starter, and he's a really, really significant contributor to this team. Boye Mafe, we keep waiting for him to take another step, waiting for him to hit his ceiling. He'll show flashes, but he never comes close to repeating it on a consistent basis. Now he's entering in the last year of his deal. A year ago, we were talking about maybe having to extend this guy this offseason, but now it's not a point of conversation at all, because he hasn't like, what at what price point do you repay him? Like, who is he and what's he going to be? So I think you let that play itself out. I'm really high on Derek Hall. Did a show on it recently. I think his ceiling, I think his future, he has a better chance to be signed to a second contract and be a long-term Seahawk, I think, than Mafe does. And then you have the two veterans. And then, already mentioned Nwosu's injury issues. DeMarcus Lawrence is a guy that I'm not sure that people understand how good he is. And they keep saying, well, he's 32 now and he's beat up. He's had injury issues. No, he hasn't. He had an injury last year that he's now fully recovered from. You look at his career, his last 7, 8, 9 years, look at his PFF grades. Whether you believe in PFF or not, it's a metric. It's at least a measuring point. It's remarkable the kinds of grades that he's consistently earned over the last 7 or 8 years. He should be talked about as one of the better edge players in the league. But because he doesn't put up, he had those 2 great years back to back where he put up double-digit sacks, but since then it's single digits. But he does all the other things. I don't think people really understand that if he's 100% healthy, I think our 2 main edge players, honestly, are Derek Hall and DeMarcus Lawrence. And he's going to be out there a lot. And he's going to be killing it in the run game, and he's going to help you get to the quarterback. I think it's a good group. For now, we talk about moving forward and what the future of that group looks like. I'd really like to see one of the young guys, either Jared Ivey or Connor O'Toole or somebody like that, step up and show that they can play too, because otherwise I think it's going to be a huge, huge need next offseason.
So do you put Jared Ivey in the outside linebacker edge rusher camp or the defensive end camp?
I have no idea. I don't even think the Seahawks know, because when you look at their official roster, here, I should pull it up. They have some guys listed at linebacker and some guys listed at defensive end.
Yeah.
That's really surprising.
Skill set wise and size wise, I think he's closer aligned. Well, he needs to put on some weight. So if they're going to put him at base defensive end and he's going to take like Mike Morris's spot on the roster this year,
right?
He's going to need to add a little bit. I think he came in at, in his workouts at like 275-ish.
Ivy.
And he needs to be probably up in the 290 range.
And he's played at that. He's played it.
And he's played at that. Yes. Yeah. And he came down a little so he could test better. He didn't test well anyway. But I see him.
See, the Seahawks have him listed as a linebacker.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just, especially in a scheme like this where it's not cut and dried, like even Leonard Williams plays edge sometimes, he plays wide. So it's kind of hard to really define those guys and put them in a bucket. But their listings here. So they have Ivy listed as an outside linebacker. They have Derek Hall listed as an outside linebacker, which isn't, I guess, as surprising. But then conversely, they have Mafe listed as a linebacker, Nwosu. But yet they do use the defensive end designation for Leonard Williams, Mike Morris, and Riley Mills. So yeah, I guess you're right. If maybe that says something about more of the identity that they see for him. I agree with you though. I'd rather, because I think he has played a little bit in college inside. You can put him on all fours and reduce him down inside a little bit. I don't know if that's necessary, that they need him to do that. But the fact that they have he and Mike Morris both listed, no, they have Morris listed as a defensive end. So that must be a little indicative of the role that they see for him.
Interesting.
Because Ivy's not that twitchy guy.
No, he's a stud, as setting the edge and so forth. So I want to get back to DeMarcus Lawrence. So, as we went through free agency, that was kind of one of the signings, if you will. We didn't do a lot in free agency, but that was kind of on the defensive side. That was one spot. You think that he's going to become a starter? I see him more as a rotation guy, and Nwosu kind of taking that spot. But I understand why DeMarcus Lawrence is there. He's 33 now. Yeah,
you look at the contract they gave him, and I understand there's a difference between the guaranteed money and the agent money. How early in free agency they signed him. There was competition for him. Like I've reportedly, like the Commanders, the Dallas wanted him back. The Commanders were in on him. The Bears were in on him. He had multiple suitors. They needed to move on him early in the process and thus pay for it also. I think that's pretty indicative of how they feel about him. And then you look at the connection with Aden Dirty, and you look at the 3 years. Here, I've got it pulled up here on PFF. So he had Aden Dirty, who's now Seahawks defensive coordinator, right? At least in title, but he was a defensive line coach in Dallas. He got 3 of his best years out of him. Like, these were his PFF overall grades the 3 years he was in Dallas. He had a 90.9, a 91, and then a 73.9 in 2022. Just, I think he's a big part of their plan.
Yeah, no, I do. Okay. I agree that Derek Hall is really this year. 8 sacks, doesn't tell the entire story. Excellent against the run. I think he can be a more physical player even. Mm-hmm. I think he would be one of those guys that would benefit from a really good, solid, huge 2-gapping nose tackle to help eat some of that traffic in the middle and allow him just to kind of play and clean up, if you will. I think Nuasu's kind of a cleanup guy as well. I think Boye Mafe, for all his faults, is a guy that can go hunt and get to the quarterback with his speed and his twitch. For me, it does seem like there might be an opportunity to bring in another guy. And it's late in the season. You would have to do it kind of with a trade scenario. There's been a lot of talk about Trey Hendrickson. You mentioned Trey Hendrickson yourself just a minute ago as potentially a guy that we may be able to acquire. If you could package a deal with like Nuaso and a pick for Trey Hendrickson, would you pull that trigger?
I'm all in on Trey Hendrickson. Like, here's the way I'll put it. I don't think they necessarily need to add him. I think this defense is fine. I think it's more than fine, and has a chance to be a top 5 defense in the league without him. But there is one thing missing on this defensive roster, and that is an elite pass rusher. None of those guys are game plan problems for the opposing offensive coordinators. The entire group is. The scheme is, like, where are they going to bring their pressures from and where are they going to simulate and who's coming? But that's different than, okay, it doesn't matter where that guy lines up, we have to account for him. And that's not Boye Mafe on his best day, isn't that guy. And Derek Hall's not that guy. He's more of a speed to power guy that, if he adds one new pass rush move each offseason, his development will be fun to see. And then, Lawrence is a guy that wins with power and not twitch and speed. Nwosu can, but he's such a good run defender that he doesn't always just peel his ears back either and just go full bore. Hendrickson is he's an elite pass rusher. He really is. He's a guy that you can put your best guy on, you can chip, you can double, whatever. He still is either going to find a way or he's going to create opportunities for others. And so I think the Seahawks are in a unique situation with cap space, with young players. They have over, half of the 90-man roster right now are guys on rookie contracts. So if you can entice them to take maybe a young player in exchange as well. And also because Hendrickson's older and you need to sign him to a new contract, I know the Bengals are stubborn and stingy and quite frankly stupid in the way that they do some of their personnel stuff and some of the decisions they make, that if they truly reach a point where they know they have no other option than to trade him, you can ask for first round picks. You're not going to get one. He's not going to command that. The Seahawks gave up a second to get Leonard Williams, who was not quite 30 when they acquired him, but the Giants picked up almost all of his salary in order for that to be elevated to a second. So if there's a deal to be made for Trey Hendrickson, I'm 100% in support of it, no matter what it looks like, because I think he's that type of player. But again, I'll qualify it by saying you don't have to. That would be a move that indicates that, this organization really thinks they can win this year, right now. And that's a big swing. So I don't know if they will do it. I don't think the Bengals are capable of making a rational, reasonable football trade with anyone. So he probably ends up holding out and then comes to a head and he ends up staying in Cincinnati in some way, shape, or form, maybe hits free agency next year.
Yeah. No, I love the player. I love the disruption. I mean, he's got 12 forced fumbles in the last 4 seasons. That's Cliff Averill like.
Yeah.
A guy that can just really has a nose for the football, is around the football all the time, and a playmaker. You take a look at this defense, that's kind of where we lack it just a little bit. Yeah, we're top 5, but you're right. The difference maker, the primo guys at their position group,
Yeah.
we kind of lack that, which, is okay in this defense because it's a team defense.
Right.
But to have a guy like that in your back pocket, oof.
Yeah.
That would certainly make things interesting, I think, and put Seattle, I think, in a position to start competing right away, deep in the playoffs. I mean,
Great.
That's the kind of player that helps you do that. It gets you over the hump to a next level, and I wouldn't oppose that at all. Okay, so let me pivot now back to the offense. I want to talk to you, and I don't think that we've had a chance to really talk about this, you and I together. Since this actually happened, we talked a little bit during the draft, but we were mostly focused on new guys coming in. But I wanted to talk about highlighting the offensive coaching staff and what that really means to this team and what the scheme does as a complementary football scheme to Mike Macdonald's defense, and how those two, we hear Mike Macdonald say complementary football when he refers to this. I want to find out from you exactly what that means to you. Like, how do you see them integrating this offense with the current players, and making it all work together?
I think it means a couple of things. First, the word consistency comes to mind. Like there's so much, and I'm going to use one of Mike Macdonald's lines. There's so much alignment in what they did in reshaping this offensive coaching staff. Is they didn't just decide they're going to change the scheme because they like some of the things about the wide zone running scheme and how it marries with the passing game, and what we've seen the Shanahan-Kubiak tree become, right? Which then became the McVay tree and all the other offshoots of that. But just a consistency of the system where they're not figuring it out as they go along. That's what it felt like with Shane Waldron. It felt like we knew he'd never called plays before, and it felt like that. We saw it on the field. Like there were circumstances he just didn't quite know how to combat certain looks, certain defenses. He didn't instinctively know where to go in certain situations. And he was just trying new things all the time. And then certainly looked like that last year. Like each week was a new experiment.
Yeah. He didn't know how to set up defenses.
No, you go down to Arizona and you kill them by running some of that pin and pull stuff, and you're pulling LeMaya and Lucas, and you're running more counter trap. And you saw the huge day that Zach Charbonnet did with Ken Walker out. And then they come back the next week and they run almost none of that stuff. And it sounded cute at the beginning of the year when Ryan Grubb said, we're going to figure out what we're good at, and then we'll lean into that. And then 18 weeks later, they never found out what they were good at. They never gave themselves a chance to find out what they were good at, because it took so long for them to decide which 5 were going to play up front and then how they were going to play. And then he just seemed so resistant to adapting and adjusting. Like he just kept those tackles on an island all year, even though they were struggling in pass protection, even though we were on our 4th string right tackle for much of the year. So it's that alignment from a schematic and a conceptual standpoint that I'm most excited about. Is those guys have all worked together so much, and they know this scheme so well, and the scheme's 30 years old now, that like the teaching that the players are getting right now, not right now because they're off, but in OTAs, I think I get excited in thinking about like much farther along, how much more advanced is that teaching that they've been getting over the last few months compared to what they got a year ago, because these guys they weren't making it up as they went along. So that's the part that excites me the most. And so that they don't have to think about like, you know what, we haven't been running it as much. We need to run it more. Like that's been going on here in Seattle for 10 years. You'll hear the head coach say, we just need to run it more. I don't think you're going to hear those things, because it's just going to all seem so cohesive.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, I love that.
It's easy to be optimistic sitting here on June 28th or whatever, but like just based on everything I'm hearing and seeing, and I think there's reasons to be optimistic about it working.
How big of a hire were both John Benton, offensive line coach, 33 years coaching veteran, Rick Dennison, run game coordinator, 28 years experience. Scott Huff last year didn't have any NFL experience. Ryan Grubb, zero experience. Clint Kubiak's been around the league for a while. He's got 2.5 years, really, if you count the Denver thing, of calling plays in the NFL. But he comes from a vast knowledge and background of this scheme.
Mm-hmm.
How big is that for this team, and marrying up to the seriousness of Mike Macdonald and the way he wants to put this thing together to win championships?
I think the John Benton hiring in particular was as important as hiring Kubiak in the first place. I really do. And I think that the Dennison thing was just like another little kind of cherry on top, that because he's basically in a support role, right? Like he's kind of just there to support Dennison, to support Justin Outen, to support Andrew Janocko. It's because he has experience doing so many things. And the reason I say that about Benton is twofold. Number one, he just has a long, successful history of coaching good offensive lines and having good running games in particular. I mean, you look at the time in Houston, much of that was under Gary Kubiak, Clint's dad, obviously, is how they were succeeding with, go look at the offensive lines that he played with during those years. I would challenge any Seahawks fan to tell me who was his starting center in Houston for 6 years. Like, I had to look it up. I wouldn't have been able to tell you off the top of my head. This is Chris Myers. And he was just a very, very good center for 6 years, never made a Pro Bowl, was never a guy that made, a ton of money. He's succeeded with players like that. You look at what they did in New Orleans last year, even though they had a rash of injuries, and they had moved their former first round pick from left tackle to right tackle because he was borderline a bust. Then they put a rookie at left tackle who hadn't played left tackle. He played mostly right tackle in college. And then they had a bunch of injuries on the interior offensive line. Their best players, Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz, got hurt. And yet they were still able to be effective running the football consistently enough, at least for it to be a threat and for that offense to remain functional, even though they had quarterback injuries as well. And their receivers were banged up. Like, he was able to still get something out of that. But I also look at it this way, and this is why I think those hires are important, is John Benton and Rick Dennison can work anywhere. And so for Mike Macdonald and John Schneider to convince those guys that this was where they wanted to be and be part of this, they had to be excited about the opportunity, from in a bunch of different ways, not the least of which is something that John Schneider has been telling us for 6 months, but a lot of fans don't want to hear it. They looked at the group of young offensive linemen we had already collected over the last 3 years, more draft resources than any team in football on the offensive line. And they said, I can work with that. We're not done. Like, go get me Gray Zabel too, but I can work with that and win with that. I think it was a huge, huge hire, because I think we all want to stomp all over Ryan Grubb, but I think Scott Huff was as big a part of the offense failing last year as he was. And I wonder if Ryan Grubb might have done a little bit better in his transition to the league if he had experience in that coaching room on the offensive staff like Clint Kubiak has now.
We are here with Dan Viens, host of the Seahawks Playbook, Seahawks Forever
What?
podcast.
I got a new kid.
Yeah, I got a coup. I hired you away.
All right, Keith. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. So, Dan, around that last point, what 2 or 3 players that come to mind for you stand to benefit the most from the new offensive scheme? It can be offensive linemen, quarterback, running backs, etc.
It's got to be the running backs, right? Like, all of them. I guess the easy answer is Ken Walker, because he looked like a guy whose wiring was shot last year. Like, his instincts had been so damaged by his lack of trust in the offensive line and knowing with certainty, like, where he could be aggressive in choosing running lanes, picking holes. And that skill that he had that was so dynamic as a rookie that we loved so much, and even a little bit in his second year, of being able to change course and reverse field and cut back, And that's all fun and everything, but I think it was to his detriment last year. And it was really easy, much in the same way that we watch quarterbacks on all 22 and go, why didn't he throw to that guy? He was wide open. Where it looks easy on tape. I think with running backs too, it's easy to say, there was a hole right there. Like, why didn't he just go there? They're such quick decisions and they have to come from a place of instinct and not rational thought, that I thought he was broken last year. And if this scheme, and the analogy I've used is what Ken Walker tries to do when he reverses field and cuts all the way back like he does, basically the way the wide zone running scheme is supposed to work is it creates those opportunities for you, right? It stretches the defense out for you. It puts a hat on a hat and just moves guys where they want to go and gives the running back just more opportunities to pick a lane and one cut and go, right? Which if Ken Walker can reach a point where he feels comfortable in this system and it fits him like a glove, I'll say it again. He's capable of a Jahmyr Gibbs type impact on this offense. Or maybe it's a better analogy to say Alvin Kamara, who even at the age of 30 last year looked like he still had something left in the tank in this scheme, in that system. Because he showed us last year, he caught 60 balls. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. And if he can get comfortable in this offense and establish himself as the guy and keep those other guys breathing down his neck from taking too many snaps from him, I think he can make himself a lot of money. First of all, he's in the last year of his deal, whether it's here or elsewhere. But I think he can have a massive impact on this roster. And maybe a good year out of Ken Walker might go farther than anybody else having a good year on that offense in determining how many games they win.
You know, I can totally see that. I agree. I think the whole room benefits. I think the guys up front are big winners. The current guys that are coming back, like the growth that you're going to see, incremental growth anyway, from that young room. I think in this scheme with this teaching, it could really be exponential.
I'll give you one other
really
answer.
Take us to the next level.
On that same point, I think maybe Jalen Sundell might benefit the most because his athleticism and Greg Bell really surprised me. I had him on the show 2 weeks ago and I said, who do you think is going to win that job? He said, I think Jalen Sundell is going to win that job. And it's not because Olu can't play. I've been sticking to my guns. I think he's a 10-year starter in this league, even though he might never make a Pro Bowl if he's in the right scheme, the right system. And while I think he can be okay and even good in this scheme, he's good. He can get to the second level. Sundell is such an elite athlete at that position that it just gives him a head up. If he can get all the other stuff figured out, right? Because Clint Kubiak puts a lot of pressure on his centers. They make the line calls, not the quarterback, as Grubb had him making last year. So it takes some off the quarterback's plate as well. But if he can handle all the rest of that stuff, his athletic ability is so far above what Olu will ever be that he could become the teacher's pet pretty darn quick, I think.
How about the one player that touches the ball every play?
The quarterback?
Benefiting from this scheme.
Or the center.
What does this scheme allow a player like Sam Darnold to be able to do? And how do you think this is going to play out? Like, is he going to settle in and really have a higher completion percentage? His length of passes, yards per attempt, is going to go down a little bit because of the efficiency and the screen game that we're going to have. The running backs are going to really benefit from that. I could see even a guy like Ken Walker have 75 receptions out of this scheme, if that is even possible. I think he was at like 45 or 50 last year. So getting another few opportunities there doesn't seem like a stretch to me. But how does this scheme hone and fit his skill set as far as being efficient in the offense?
Because Clint Kubiak builds escape hatches into every single pass play that he calls. Every single pass play has a hot route or a check down, if you will. That's kind of the common term people like to use, right? That was not the case under Ryan Grubb. And so there were times where, while people in the stands and watching on TV are like, why is he still holding the ball? It's because he didn't have anywhere else to go with it. Because Ryan Grubb would, and in many ways, he was very Mike Leach-ish and air raid-ish in the way that he operated in offense. Like, he would run that 4 vertical type stuff and all go type stuff and wouldn't give him an outlet. That sounds crazy, and it kind of is. But he's not the only coordinator that doesn't build hot routes into every single one of his plays. But that Shanahan scheme does. And we've seen it kill us over the years, right? The checkdowns or the 49ers, right? Because you're guarding against the explosives. And that's the other part of it. I like the combination of, if the run game can be good enough, a lot more under center than we're used to seeing, a lot more play action than we're used to seeing. If the run game improves, it's the best of both worlds for the quarterbacks, because there's going to be opportunities for explosive plays. We certainly saw that in Minnesota from him last year in a very similar offensive scheme. But if it's not there, there will always be a check down. And I think that's going to be great for Sam, because he can get into trouble. He holds the ball a little bit too long, like, a lot of quarterbacks do from time to time. I'll use the Matt Hasselbeck analogy again. I think what we're going to get from Sam Darnold is similar numbers. I think he's a 30-plus touchdown guy every year if he stays healthy for 17 games. But he's probably also going to throw 10 interceptions. He's going to throw some balls you don't want him to throw. He's going to have some one touchdown,
I'll
three
take that ratio.
He's going to have bad games. He'll have a 1 touchdown, 3 interception game. And then he'll come back the next week and throw 4 touchdowns. And we didn't even see that out of Geno the last couple of years, right? Those big games, those like 350-yard, 5-touchdown games. I think with this scheme and everything that they're doing to improve the offense, I think Sam will give you some of those kinds of games. There will be a clunker wrapped around it, mixed in there. But if they can be consistent in the other aspects of running that offense and running the football, you can survive that. And that's fine. If you don't have one of the top 5 quarterbacks, then you just have to live with some interceptions from time to time. It's how you come back from those. And I think he showed Minnesota last year. He had his worst game against Jacksonville, threw 3 interceptions against a defense that wasn't very good, right? He bounced back the next 2 weeks and went 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. So I think that says a lot about him.
Interesting. All right, let's get to this final segment of the show. We're going to talk about some camp battles. Now, I think in the prep leading up to this, I asked you to name one, but I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to have you just kind of name a few as they come to mind.
Sure.
But I'll kind of get the conversation started. I think I see the camp battles being created at right guard, obviously at center. We just talked about Jalen Sundell. I think that's still a battle that I'd love to be able to see. The wide receiver 4th and 5th spots on this roster seem unsettled. I've seen some guys say that Torrey Horton could be in the conversation for that number 3 spot, even out of training camp. So that would come a little quicker than maybe some people would anticipate. You've got the back end of the running back room, the defensive end with Mike Morris and Jared Ivey, potentially the linebackers, the back end of the room, and at cornerback, especially with the addition of Shaquille Griffin. And so I just kind of wanted to see where you're what you're looking forward to the most, and maybe folks that are watching live can have a little input on some questions around that, and see if we can drum up some things that maybe some people aren't thinking about yet.
I think my favorite camp battle now is going to be you versus Keith once he comes back from vacation and finds out that you've replaced him with me. That's going to be right. You have to live stream that, please.
If you take off on vacation, this is the chance you take.
I think of all those battles, the wide receiver one really intrigues me the most, because there's a couple things going on. First of all, they have a ton of talent there. Like, I think they're gonna have to cut guys at the cut down to 53 this year that are going to be claimed by other teams, that they're not going to be able to get through to the practice squad. But then the other one is, and you said, well, 4th, 5th position, right? Because you get down to, once you get past JSN, Cup, MVS, and Torrey Horton, the next question becomes not who makes the roster, but how many receivers are they going to keep?
That's exactly right.
Now you're having to account for a 3rd quarterback, which they've never carried 3. You're having to account for a fullback, which, they carried one with Nick Bellore for years, but they also listed him as a linebacker. And so that allowed them to keep, only a 3rd or 4th linebacker at times. But, and then on top of that, Kubiak uses fewer 3 wide receiver sets than most,
Yes.
and he uses
Yes.
more 12 and 13 personnel, or at least as much as anyone in the league. So do you have to carry 4 tight ends? Does that give an advantage to a player like Jake Bobo if they're going to keep a 5th wide receiver? Because not that they would ever convert him to tight end, but he can do tight end things. In a condensed formation, he can play a big slot role as maybe a tight end would. So maybe that allows him to keep 3. The fact that Robbie Oots was a tight end and always has been until being converted to fullback, that maybe that allows him to only keep 3 tight ends because he can be the de facto 4th tight end. And then you're not taking a spot away from the wide receivers. You can still keep 5. If you go 6, who is it? Is it Ricky White? Because he's a draftee this year and he's so good on special teams. I think he has a lot of upside as a receiver in the future. I'd like to see him make the roster. But, Cody White just keeps making plays. You keep hearing about how good he looks in OTAs. Steven Sims was making plays in OTAs, and he can return punts.
Special teams guy for sure.
Yeah, Derek Young's an original draft pick who has all the athleticism in the world. And then are you only going to keep 3 running backs? Because Kubiak also likes to use more 2-back sets than we've seen here in Seattle since Mike Holmgren's been here, probably. So,
we finally have fascinating conversation around roster construction. We've known kind of what it's going to look like for years and years and years, and now it just seems like it's completely all up in the air.
Because they usually keep 6 receivers to start.
Offensive linemen could be an issue.
Yeah, they kept 11 last year, and that's way more than they typically do. But they wanted to protect all those young guys.
Keep as few as 9 this year.
Yeah, which I think is why
I think they, have Christian Haynes taking snaps at center, and
I think so too.
Other things.
I think, which begs the question of, like, let's say, for example, Jalen Sundell does establish himself early in camp as the starter. Do you make phone calls? Do you see if another team in need of a solid center wants to give you a late pick, a conditional pick for Oluwatimi? Because good centers are hard to find. The last couple drafts have been weak at center. And now you can say, okay, well, Christian can play there. Gray Zabel can also play there. We still have Mike Nowitzki. They still have Morangis is going to be protected because of the international player program. So they're going to be able to protect him on the practice squad no matter what. And if they like him, I think it gives them enough flexibility that way that versatility can come in handy. Again, people can bash on our offensive line in that group, and they're just not good enough, and we need to get rid of all of them, all they can, or all they want to. But there's going to be offensive linemen cut from this team on the cut down to 53 that are going to be claimed by other teams.
I agree.
There's a lot of talent there.
Well, there's one battle that I really wanted to talk to you about among many, but I really wanted to talk about Christian Haynes, Anthony Bradford, Satoa Lumea. And I don't want to rule out Lumea because he had some great experience last year in getting some snaps, plus a full off season in the weight room to build up that functional strength. And I think the new scheme benefits him as well, being as athletic as he is. But I really kind of wanted to hone in, to be honest, on Anthony Bradford for a minute, because Keith, as you know, really enjoys his offensive line stuff, and he has been making the argument over and over and over again on this show that Anthony Bradford might as well have one foot out the door already, because he just doesn't fit the scheme and the athletic profile you need at that spot to reach points out on the outside of this on this offense. I'm hearing the opposite from coaches that are really high on him and giving him every opportunity to show that he can play in this scheme and fit into this offense, sharing number 1 snaps at right guard with Christian Haynes. So what is your opinion about Bradford, and who do you think emerges eventually at this right guard spot?
I really want it to be Christian Haynes. I loved the pick when it happened. I thought we got great value there. In fact, I remember doing mock drafts before the draft last year, and we didn't have that second round pick. And I could never get Christian Haynes in mock drafts. He was never there at 81. And so I was super excited when he was. I think he's a much better fit for this scheme, and everything you hear about how the coaches love him. It looked like from some of the pictures and videos and some of the in-person accounts of people that covered OTAs that he looked better physically, that he did change his body a little bit. And so I want that to work, certainly. But I said it on the show the other day. I was talking with Chris Kidd, and we were trying to come up with our most forgotten players, guys that are being overlooked and dismissed. And mine was Bradford. Don't give up on him yet. And if you think I'm crazy, listen to John Schneider talk. Listen to Mike McDonald talk. Schneider said on his show right before the draft, he said, this guy's an elite athlete, and the numbers prove it out. I was trying to find his relative athletic score. I was trying to find that chart, but this guy for his size tested at an elite athletic level. And, Schneider will tell you himself, we like how he gets to the second level. He can get to the second level. Yeah. If he can, and if he can improve the pass protection, because we've been talking about this wide zone scheme and how it relates to the running game all off season, but the best 5 are also going to have to protect Sam Darnold too. And if that's been his biggest weakness, in my opinion, his first 3 years in the league. But what he does well, he does at a level that Christian Haynes would never be able to. He can literally block guys with one arm. Like, he's so powerful. He can
Talk to me a little bit about the split that you see Clint Kubiak running wide zone versus gap, power, inside zone, etc.
I mean, all I can go by are his historical numbers, and it looks like even up until last year in New Orleans, I just looked at this recently. It's in the 60 to 70th percentile.
So these guys are still going to need to run power, run.
There's times you're gonna, it's gonna be 3rd and 1, right? And maybe you have Jalen Milroe on the field or whatever. You're gonna try some version of the tush push. Like, he is their strongest offensive lineman, bar none. Period. And also, offensive linemen, as much as any other position on the league, defensive linemen are in this same bucket, take the longest to develop. Like, physically, just the speed of the game, mentally, everything else. Sometimes everybody wanted us to just step up and match the Vikings offer for Will Fries last year, right? And go 5 years, $81 million, even without a physical. Will Fries wasn't very good until the second half of his 3rd year in the league. He wasn't. And then everybody wanted us to pivot to Tevin Jenkins because he was an next available guard, and he has to be better than everybody on our roster right now, right? Because those guys stunk. Tevin Jenkins stunk for his first 3 years in the league too. And he couldn't stay healthy. And then even when he struggled. It takes these guys a while. You look at that Philadelphia Eagles line and some of the guys on their line that have become so good. They weren't good right away. So I do think it's going to be like, I'll put it this way. First day of training camp, that's the number one thing I'm watching, is that battle, especially when they put the pads on. I want it to be determined early, like by the second preseason game at the latest. They need to figure out who that guy is, get those 5 working together, and move forward with it. But I'm not dismissing him or counting him out until I see it.
So the last several questions have been centered around the center position. Center is the most interesting battle. Center touches the ball as much as the quarterback. Always a spot to watch unless there's a Pro Bowler there. Can you see Haynes getting the starting center job and Bradford at right guard? Let's talk about the center position for a second. And then I had one more spot that I wanted to quickly finish out with you on. You'd mentioned Sundell. Kandata mentioned Sundell. You can't rule out Oluwatimi only because he's still in that competition. He's still sharing those first team snaps. They've also had Haynes over there. So now you've got kind of a 3-way thing there. Haynes, I think we talked about it, could be just kind of an emergency backup situation. They shuffle some guys around if their main guy gets cut just because of the numbers game on roster construction. But talk to me about the center position.
Yeah, I don't think Haynes is an option, even in the competition there, because he's never done it. He took a few snaps Senior Bowl week at center. I think they did this a little bit late last year too. We learned at the end of the season that they had started working him in there a little bit. Because of what I mentioned earlier, that Clint Kubiak puts a lot of responsibility on the center's plate. The center is the one that's calling the protections, not the quarterback. And so, it's one thing even for Jalen Sundell to go from the FCS level playing center, but he does have a year under his belt. But he didn't have to call the protections last year because because Ryan Grubb had the quarterback doing it. So I think that's a big enough learning curve in and of itself. But then you take a guy who's never done it on any level and expect him to be the starter. So that's not even an option. The one advantage I think Oluwatimi might have over Sundell today, because we just didn't see enough of it. I mean, we can go back and look at the Green Bay game last year and watch the 16 straight pass plays that he called for Sam Howell or whatever, and judge Sundell's pass protection ability maybe a little bit there, but even that's unfair because the defense knew that there was no threat of a run. But Oluwatimi, what got him drafted in the 5th round, even though the things John Schneider said first about him the night of the draft was how stout he is, how you can't move him, but it was his pass protection production. Didn't allow a single sack or quarterback hit his last year at Virginia or his 1 year at Michigan. That's impressive, especially playing in the Big Ten, right? You have to be able to protect Sam Darnold. When things fell apart for the Vikings those last 2 games, it was because the interior offensive line couldn't protect Sam Darnold. It's true of any quarterback, but I think more particularly this quarterback. And so if all things are equal and you like Sundell's athleticism a little bit better in the wide zone game, but you think Olu can be okay there, but he's a better pass protector, he's going to win that job. Let's not overlook that.
Interesting insight there. Okay, last camp battle. I want to talk to you about the cornerback room.
That would have been the one I would have said. Yeah.
I think that prior to this week, I would have had a little bit more concern. The Griffin signing alleviates some of that for me, that depth that I think that we were just lacking. Of course, I think John Schneider agreed. He went out and got Griffin. They were looking at a few other players as well. But now that room seems to be completed prior to camp anyway. How do you view it? How do you view the scheme diversity with those guys and the way that Mike McDonald likes to use them? And do you think that we're pretty good? We're pretty set at that spot, especially if you factor in a couple of the safeties that can kind of change spots as well. Do you feel good about it?
I do. I think, you basically, Shaq moves into that Artie Burns role of the veteran that maybe you don't need to call on him that often, but if you do, you're going to get solid play. I do feel I'm right there with you. I feel a lot better about the room now than I did before, because it's one thing, fans, I think sometimes when we get into these discussions, get caught up just looking at the starting lineup. Like, why would we need another guy there? We have so-and-so and so-and-so, but like, injuries happen. And you need to have a 4th corner. You need to have a 5th corner. And so while we love what
there's matchup opportunities that Mike McDonald has with certain players, certain teams against certain offenses. Yeah, you want to be able to draw in other guys as well.
And as much as I was frustrated as I know everybody else was during the first part of Shaq's career when he was here, at just the lack of ball production. Like, he'd be in position, he wouldn't get his head around, he wouldn't make plays on the ball. He's only has 8 interceptions in 7 seasons in the league. It's his ability as a run defender, and he had his best year last year in Minnesota as a tackler and as a run defender.
He had 39 opportunities and only missed 1.
Yeah, it's just like a warm blanket. Like, it just makes me feel better about what's happening over there. So if you're one of those fans that thinks that Reek Woolen is allergic to tackling, can't do it, doesn't like to get physical, which is wrong. We can have a discussion about that. Then you should feel better too, because, against a team that wants to try to pound the ball against us, like Green Bay did coming out last year in those first 2 drives, basically put the game out of reach by just running it down our throats. Then you could lean on a guy like that if you need to in certain situations. I like the young guys they have at the end of the roster too. I like Nehemiah Pritchett, and I want to see, heard good things at his performance in OTAs. I'd like to see him have a good preseason. Everybody's excited about Zy Alexander out of LSU and his coverage skills, but he's a 4.6 guy. So I just feel a lot more comfortable about it with Shaq. To me, the biggest thing is going to be how they utilize those guys, and all eyes are on Devin Witherspoon. Like, do they want to? I had assumed when we first heard the ideas of how they might use Nick Emmanwori as a rookie initially in the box more, not having him worry about having to play deep safety, that kind of stuff, that I know I wasn't alone. A bunch of us thought, well, cool, that's going to allow him. He's going to be that big nickel, right? and allow Witherspoon to play more outside, which is what I want to see. It doesn't sound like they were doing that with him. And in fact, on the show, now I can't remember who told me this, but it was either Greg Bell or Corbin Smith said they were mostly using him as a weak side linebacker in the workouts that they were allowed to attend anyway. So maybe some of that is subterfuge, right? Maybe some of that is like, we don't want to show.
If you listen to Mike McDonald talk about that very subject, they have a methodically organized plan for Nick Emenwari. And I think that's just the beginning. That's like where they start him and how he learns that defense. But I think eventually by week 8, he's going to be all over the place.
Because if he
it allows Devin Witherspoon to play more outside.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to be 100%,
right?
But they're so interchangeable. I think you're going to see him play all over the place.
Yeah, if he can cover tight ends and backs and really prove that he's an asset in the coverage game like that. First of all, what a problem that can cause for offenses in the middle of the field, having a guy like that with that kind of length, right? We saw the impact that Kyle Hamilton had when he basically put him in that type of role. About halfway through his rookie year, he kind of transitioned him close to the line of scrimmage, right? It just makes things harder on defenses again. Like, where's Devin Witherspoon going to be?
It does protect. It offers some protection to Devin Witherspoon as well. He's such a physical player, but doesn't have the physical body to hold up over a long period of time.
Yeah,
I think this helps extend his career, actually.
Yeah, I think I took that for granted a little bit until I heard Witherspoon on John Gruden's show. And Devin himself was talking about how he's having to take on guards at 185 pounds or whatever he is today. So I'd like to minimize that as much as possible.
I think so.
Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap this thing up, Dan. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Your insights are always welcome. You dive in full time to this thing now, and do a very good job in your research, the way that you organize your thoughts and wrap it around a topic is second to none. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do for the community, because we're all in this together. I think there's a number of us that know each other, have shows now, guest appearances on shows and so forth. And I love to do that. I love the opportunity to talk to other people. Talking to Mr. Myers is always good and always fun, but I enjoy the other perspectives. I love having you on. You're one of my favorite guests for sure. So I appreciate you. Tell everyone where they can find you and what you've got coming up for the rest of the summer.
Yeah, I appreciate the words. It's been great getting to know you. You and I count you as a friend now. And I like what you said about the Seahawks content creator community. I've said this myself. It can't be said enough. And it was actually another one. It was Brandon Kane of the Hawks Nest who said on my show one time, we were talking about this very subject. He said he pulled out the old adage of rising tides raise all ships, right? And we can all bring each other up and help each other out. It appears from afar that that's not always the norm, that some other fan bases and some other creator competitions in some other markets are a little more contentious. So I'm glad it's not that way among all of us. But yeah, Seahawks Forever obviously is the name of the YouTube channel, and it's expanded now that I do it full time. There's a new Patreon now. You can go over and check out the membership tiers over there so you can watch things ad free. And it's a little tough this time of year. There is some member only, Patreon only content over there that you can't get on YouTube. So that is available. But once we get into the season, there will be much more of that. And then the show is available on all the audio podcasts as well. And I was just going back this week and I think I'm going to blow the dust off the writing side of me and myself, nice, and fire up the Substack and maybe supplement what I do with some writing stuff, which I used to do with Keith when he and I were running 12th Man Rising together. I got burned out on writing back then, just having to do it all the time. But I'm feeling that itch coming back a little bit as a supplement. Nice. So keep an eye out for that. And then as Shane, good day, mate, as I see over in the comments, has pointed out, I have been promised credentials by the team for the first few days of training camp. And so I'll be headed back to the Seattle area here in a few weeks. And then at that point, I'm going to get an opportunity to meet with everybody in the media relations department there. And so there's a good opportunity I'm optimistic that I'll be given credentials for the full season. We'll be able to cover the team full time. And so that just means more access, means more content, and better content, up close look, and being able to see more of what's going on. So that's what's happening.
Wow. That's fantastic. Love that. Okay, let's get out of here. Thanks for the conversation. Thanks everybody for joining us in this conversation. And I am the host of the Seahawks Playbook podcast, usually here with, again, Mr. Myers. And we do the show once or twice a week. You can find us on your favorite podcast platforms and our YouTube channel. And when you do hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. We always enjoy those. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.